we're off. So thank you everyone for joining us. This is our first meeting of the year, and we've started quite early, so we'll start as we mean to go on. And today it'll be a bit of a welcome back to everyone who's started work after the break. And then we'll also be talking about the brand new B2C Solution Architect cert. There we go. So I'm Kerry Townsend. Up until recently, I've been working at Accenture, and now I'm freelancing. And I've been working with Marketing Cloud for maybe a good 4 to 5 years now, but also have been predominantly in the Salesforce space and the core platform. And my co-host is Jimson.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Jimson Lee. I'm with Cloud Analysts, and we're a cross-cloud registered partner in Salesforce. So I've been using Salesforce since 2005 and used ExactTarget in 2009. So when the whole acquisition took place in 2013, it was just a natural fit for me to roll on to Marketing Cloud. And yeah, we've done a lot of good cross-cloud projects in the last 2 years. And I'd love to, show some demos or some talks in the upcoming year on this.
Cool.
Okay.
It's very exciting. So today, again, a little bit of a welcome, which we're doing, then just a couple of announcements and key dates for things that are coming up. Then we'll just glance back into 2020 and just recap some of the things that both Jimson and I saw from Dreamforce to You and DreamTX. We'd be really interested to know from the group who else may have attended that, what people thought, what pricked people's interests. So if you're interested in taking yourself off mute and letting us know, then that would be great. Then we'll step into the main event and we'll hand over to Doug, who's going to talk about the new B2C Solution Architect cert. I've locked that in now. And then we'll have some Q&A discussion, because I had some questions. I imagine other people have, so we'd love for you to use this opportunity to get out all your questions, even if we can't answer them on this particular session, then we'll look to get that information out to you. Then we'll wrap up. We try to keep this to approximately an hour to be respectful of people's time and also be conscious that a lot of people might have already spent quite a bit of time online, either today or over the last couple of weeks. But just before we start, I'm interested to understand, as it's the new year, to run a poll and find out how many of the people that we have here today are actually, this is the first time they're attending the group. So this is just a very simple question, which is this the first time attending the group? So I'm going to launch that poll now. And if as many of you who can participate, that'd be really interesting for us. Wonderful, thank you. Getting nice number of responses in. Brilliant, cool. So majority of people are returning, which is lovely to see you. Thank you for coming back again and spending your time with us. But we do have a couple of new people, so that's always great to see. So if you know anybody else that would be interested in this group, particularly now we're able to meet online, which makes it far more accessible. So feel free to share this within your network if you think it will be useful to anyone. We do record these sessions and put them on YouTube. So we do have a channel that's on, which is FMC London. So again, if you miss a session, then you can usually catch up with the recording there a couple of days after that. So thank you, everyone. So in the end, we had 6 new people and 22 of those were returning. So that's wonderful. Thank you very much. So in terms of upcoming meetings, now we tried to get into a routine where we'll let you know the date coming up. We were planning to do the 11th of February to keep this sort of second week of the month, but just really realizing that the Jan release overview for Marketing Cloud is actually also going to be on the 11th, and that's scheduled for 5 p.m. GMT. So in that instance, we'd be either cutting that off and clashing with it. So we will probably look to move that meeting, but try and keep it as close to then as possible. For anybody else that also works in a cross-cloud space, the admins and the dev group in London are also meeting next week, so feel free to check those out. And then for those of you who might know London's Calling from being part of the London community, that event is running on the 19th of March. We haven't issued the information on how to register for tickets yet, but it will be coming soon. So just keep an eye out for that. And if you are interested, then maybe follow along on the Twitter handle, because all the announcements come out of there first. So if we start with some Dreamforce to You highlights, and Jimson, I'll hand over to you.
Great, thanks, Carrie. I'll just be not even 2 minutes. So if we look back at December 1st of last year, which seems like a long time ago, you'll notice and heard about the acquisition of Slack to Salesforce. So it was no surprise that on the Dreamforce to You on December 2nd, that the whole focus was on Slack, as well as Customer 360. So all this is still available on their YouTube and Salesforce channels. And I actually attended it at night and I watched it. And the primary takeaways was that there were really 3 good demos performed by Mark and everyone else. And one was a government organization, which was the US state of Rhode Island. There was a Bentley demo, which is a high-end luxury vehicle product line. And the third demo was AT&T, which is a consumer product line. So they went through a lot of Customer 360, they did a bit of Slack, and they did a bit of Einstein work. So we're not going to show it here, but if you're interested in learning more about what C360A, as what we call it, can do for you, I highly recommend just going in there and just look at the product demos. And that's it really for the Dreamforce. That's the update. Yep. Carrie?
Yep. Yeah. So I also attended some of the sessions which were at DreamTX. So that was the content that happened late in December. I'm just interested who else attended that. So could you put in the chat whether you attended that? So that's a yes or a no as to whether you were able to also make that.
Well, a lot of no's.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sort of tricky time of year, because it's been quite an intense year where everybody had been online, and then to be able to carve out that time in a couple of the weeks before Christmas, where I think everybody probably was quite drained and needed a bit of a break. But there were, so in that, because obviously one of the challenges around these sessions is the fact that the people that might want to attend are not all on the same time zone. I mean, unlike Dreamforce, they just get to schedule it between a 9 to 5 maybe during a day or a set series of time, and not have to worry about the fact that there might be some other people in Australia or in the UK that want to see some of that content. And I think they did a reasonably good job of actually trying to stagger that, because it is a challenge, and there were always going to be sort of some winners and losers for that. And I think I'm certainly feeling it. Like, I'm interested in Salesforce content, but it's always in my evening, right? So you have to, come up with that balance of whether you can carve out that time and whether you can even concentrate for that long after what can be quite a long day. But they definitely had some marketing tracks, right? And some content spread across the day. So these are some of the marketing sessions that happened. And to find those, you just go to dreamforce.com or Salesforce/Dreamforce and go to the trail maps and pick marketing. But they had one on the marketing cloud innovations and releases, then holistic marketing programs, personalization, the future of marketing cloud, CDP, and how to measure marketing cloud, marketing agility. And so those were some of the sessions. The two that I predominantly sort of focused on or looked at were around the marketing cloud innovations and releases, because that had some forward-looking information, and also around sort of ethics and personalization. So our data is being used, and how we interact with things is being, I mean, monitored is not a great word, but sometimes it sort of feels like that. And when you're moving around the internet and things are following around after you, then you do want to understand what that is. So I was interested to understand what Salesforce said about that. So in here, within these sessions, the innovation and releases one, I think that's probably worth a watch if you're interested to see what's coming forward. So they talked about the things that we know about. So customer 360 audiences, Interaction Studio powered by Einstein, and that will have been the, the Ever Gauge, there we go, acquisition around that year. And then they also talked about the Pardot Premium, interactive email. So we had a session on that when it launched back in April. And I think from what I've seen within the community, that's been quite well received. And then also Einstein enhancements around Marketing Cloud. And we're definitely seeing more of that, where there's more applications are being peppered around the different places within Marketing Cloud. So of the people on the call, I mean, has anybody used these features? I mean, if you've used any of those, I'd be interested to see if you could put them in the chat. So has anybody used interactive email so far and been able to get that? Cool. So it sounds like, you know, some people have had access to these, but they're still filtering through in some cases. And obviously it depends on where you work and who has access to these features. But some of them are also more accessible than others. So interactive email might be more accessible because you use Email Studio, whereas, you know, if you don't have Audience 360, like Customer 360 audiences, then, you know, you won't get to use that until it comes on board. And what was interesting is what 5 of the highlights that they say were coming. So Datorama reports in Marketing Cloud, and I will have felt that the reporting and dashboard capability in Marketing Cloud is not good, and would be a polite way of putting it. So I'm very interested to see that. Again, some more developments for Customer 360 audiences. And obviously I have no insight, but I would imagine that we'll see more coming around that. It's just speculation over the next year. AMP into email. And then they also talked about chat and WhatsApp. And interestingly, you install an app from the App Exchange in order to get that going. And then Total Connect in Datorama, which is about being able to connect more of your data, bring that together, unify it and harmonize it, and making that easier for Marketing Cloud. So out of those sessions, is anybody particularly interested in any of those? And if anybody wants to come off mute and, you know, talk about how they've been waiting for one of these for like years and they're really excited about it, please do.
Well, the funny thing is that Salesforce Marketing Cloud YouTube channel, they released a video about the chat messaging with WhatsApp for Marketing Cloud. And then I went today so I can present it, and they yanked it. They made it private. So I have no idea why. I don't know, maybe Doug can explain why, but I don't know why they took it off.
I saw it yesterday as well, actually. So I'm not sure either.
Yeah.
There's no release notes out yet officially. So I guess it's something that someone accidentally pushed a button on.
Yeah. Anyway, maybe someone internal from Salesforce can look at it, maybe. But anyway,
Yep.
Other than that, the C360 audiences, the only thing I can say about is right now it's a bit limited. The only 3 data sources you can get is Marketing Cloud, Sales Cloud or Service Cloud, and Amazon S3. And those are the only 3 sources. So I think the next releases are going to have more connectors for different data sources, which should be exciting, because right now that's a bit limiting. Other than that, yeah, everything else is, you know, all, you know, safe harbor, forward-looking statements.
Yep. Yeah, no, so no, please carry on.
I was just asking, were the Datorama reports, did you have to have Datorama to see them in Marketing Cloud?
Didn't mention that.
So can give you some kind of background to that one, is that this will be a limited essentially version of Datorama, which is shown up in Marketing Cloud. So my guess, and the speculation part comes in here, is that essentially that will mean that you'll basically be able to have that connected. And then if you choose to pay additional, you'll be able to have additional features added or access to a whole instance, which can do other things. But the Marketing Cloud part will be kind of built in by default. And it's essentially a way to go away from discovery reports, which many of us have seen today, and many of us do not like using, and many of us have problems with. So it's kind of a replacement for that. So I'm looking forward to it, especially because it should contain, from the videos I've seen of it working in an actual environment, SMS, push, and email. And so you're actually going to have some kind of standardized reporting for cross-channel for a change.
Cool.
Cool. It's worth, like that video is only 30 minutes, right? And the what's coming section is towards the end, right? So it is worth skimming that. And they do a demo of that in there, and it's all pre-built things, but in comparison to what we were using for visualization before, it looks like, you know, it's a huge step on, right? So that's quite exciting. I would imagine, as Doug said, that there are opportunities to extend your reporting whilst talking to your account executive, but it looks pretty interesting, which was good. And then as I mentioned, the other session that I was interested in was around the principle, like around ethics. And they, like Salesforce, have a team that look at ethics and humane use of their tools, which, to be fair, I didn't actually know. And I've been in this ecosystem for quite a while, and that one has just passed me by previously. But I just thought that this was an interesting topic and something particularly for our group, because it doesn't matter what bits of the technology you're using, it's all about putting the people that you're talking to at the heart of what you're building and designing, and just being aware of the trends around that and what's important. And again, it comes back to collecting the appropriate amount of data. And they were highlighting that there, it's also like, as though it's appropriate also for the person whose data you're collecting, there are considerations around, you know, the people who are collecting the data, because if you've got too much of it, you can't do anything with it anyway. So it actually ends up causing more maintenance and overhead. Being transparent about what you're going to do with it. And I think people are finding that increasingly important, because, as you said, we're finding that all of these big tools that we've shared a lot of information or data with are now sort of either coming together or using that data in ways that we hadn't even thought about beforehand. And it's, in some cases, like, you don't even notice, and in other cases you can be, well, it can be a bit concerning, depends on the use. And that people want control, right? So if I'm happy to give you your data as long as I can remove that when I feel that it's appropriate. And also being clear on the benefit, because I think I would definitely be in a situation where sometimes I would rather pay a small amount of money for you not to use my data in ways that I don't want than have a service for free, right? And I don't know where everybody else fits on that. If anybody has any strong opinions, I'd be interested just to see where everybody is in the group. But it's just it's a way that we're going to need to increasingly think, and this is only going to become more prevalent. I mean, I like WhatsApp because there's no commercial purposes on it, right? So once that landscape changes and someone tries to market to me on there, I'm not sure how I'm going to respond to that, to be honest. To be interested if other people have an opinion on that.
Well, there's been a huge, in the last week or so especially, migration to both Telegram and Signal from WhatsApp. And there's quite a bit of media coverage about that, including the popularity of articles of how to make the migration and so on.
Okay. No, which is really interesting, and something that, you know, other people might be interested in, or at least I'd be interested to investigate. I mean, I had a rather surreal moment today where I got a message from my mum going, I was just about to sign up for TikTok, but I wanted to know, you know, whether there should be anything that I should be aware of for that. And I was like, this of all the things that I thought that I would be asked, that wasn't it. So yeah, even at that sort of, you know, everyone's a little bit more conscious about, you know, where they share their data, or what's behind, like, anything that's for free. Cool. So if we now move along to the main event, and I will introduce Doug here, who's joined us. Thank you. One of the reasons it's great to have Doug here is because you've recently passed the certification, so that's always a win. And also you've been involved and has some context. And I think we definitely have someone else on the call who is involved and has some context, but I don't know how involved they want to be, so I'm not going to put anyone on the spot.
For sure.
Cool. There we go.
So let me take over the screen, I guess, then, Carrie.
Yep. Oh, I've jumped ahead. I've jumped so far ahead.
You want to continue? Yes. I shall take this one, and I believe this is the right screen, and you should see a lovely
yes,
PowerPoint deck, which I built all by myself yesterday, and definitely was not a template when I was given. Excellent. So hi everybody. I'm super happy here. I can see there's a lot of participants here today. So I'm really excited to get a chance to talk to you. I am just going to go through a couple of things. So first of all, myself, I'm Doug Midgley. I'm the commerce and marketing lead for the Salesforce business group at Accenture Netherlands. I'm based in Amsterdam. I'm originally from New Zealand, and so I speak very fast and sometimes with a very bizarre accent. I've been working for Accenture now for 5 years, 4 of which were in Frankfurt in Germany, and the last year in the Netherlands. And I like to think of myself as kind of a cross-cloud Salesforce architect with a focus on Marketing Cloud usually. And slowly I'm getting dragged into different areas, and that's definitely part of what this certification is about, and getting people involved not just in their one domain but in a couple of others. Maybe to go through things, I was actually involved in the development for this exam, so we're going to go through a bit of a background as well about what's going on there, the process behind how kind of the exam's there. I did a session quickly internally with my team at Accenture. And one of the questions that surprised me was actually about like how do exams actually kind of go. So certainly there might be someone on the call that yells at me if I go through this, but I think I'm allowed to talk about it, so I'm going to go with it anyway. And it's just a bit of a background around how the exams actually come to be. We're talking into then how the target audience is. So what kind of people are we normally trying to approach here? A little bit around content, some prerequisites, my advice on preparation, and then yeah, free for all Q&A if you'd like to. I have some time this evening, so if it goes a little bit longer, I'm more than happy to answer those questions for everyone. Apart from that, let's get started. So this is all a lot of things that are partially things that we've discussed in the preparation for making the certification, part of the things that I've seen myself, part of the things that we see in Accenture in the market. And so it's kind of a combination of a bit of comments and things around that. So I hope everyone takes it with a bit of a grain of salt, that it is certainly my kind of opinion around things, or the things that I've seen. And certainly I think Salesforce may have certain other aspects or opinions which they think about it. But I hope that it's not too far misaligned, but I just want to put that disclaimer in there. I think really this certification is about the fact that we've always seen the CTA, and especially in the Salesforce world, we've always kind of seen the CTA as the main goal is to be a technical architect within Salesforce, if you really want to reach the pinnacle of certification. I think a lot of people have really seen that and said, well, you know, especially with all the acquisitions recently within Salesforce, well, recently over the last 10 years, I guess, there's really been something missing there for how do we plug in all the different things together? How do we try and give someone a focus where maybe they're not so interested in core, but they're more focused on maybe the commerce and marketing cloud areas, or more generally around how all this stuff works together. So a lot of this is really about trying to improve the quality of those multi-cloud solutions, right? We're seeing a lot of us, you know, obviously within Accenture, we work often with really big clients, but there's a lot of companies there which have specializations in one or two areas. And really it's about trying to help them extend their reach and try and get into different areas and trying to encourage that as well. The hope is that, you know, when I have people that are also on my team, that they can say, okay, well, I know Marketing Cloud. I've got my consultant exam in Marketing Cloud. What's the next step? What should I be aiming for? And I really think that this kind of certification is the thing for those people, so that they can kind of go, okay, the next goal is marketing doesn't work by itself. It works with other systems, and you being able to get involved with those other clouds and those other products is really important for you to kind of progress to that next level. A lot of that is therefore kind of talking about cross-cloud certification. So you'll see here in the prerequisites, a lot of the stuff around the fact that it's not just marketing cloud and that makes you B2C or fine, but rather saying maybe you've done all the core certificates. And I have some of the teams that have been reaching out to me from our teams, which have done, basically all the certifications you can under CCA and said, we want to do this, but we don't have marketing cloud certifications. And I think that's exactly the story that we're trying to tell, is trying to say, well, yeah, this is a bit of a different path, and you're going to have to start learning around those other kind of clouds. So I think that's really about trying to get those people involved in going, oh, there's a world outside the kind of the CTA pyramid. So I'm really hoping that that's kind of a good background around where this is all coming from, because I think it's something that a lot of us that work in the marketing area have really seen in the past, and we've kind of gone, where is our our architecture certification? And I think that's, honestly, I'm not unhappy about the fact that it's not a marketing cloud architect certification, but rather it's B2C, because exactly like I say, I think it really does touch on a lot of different areas. I kind of wanted to, again, mention just the process around how an exam works, because often, we get a lot of feedback. I've also worked with the development for the Marketing Cloud Developer, Marketing Cloud Admin, and Consultant exam. So I'm pretty used to this kind of exam process now. And one of the things that sometimes hurts me a little bit, because I kind of feel like it's a bit my baby, is some of the feedback that comes back around, oh, this is unfair, this is ridiculous, this question was so easy, this question was so hard. And so I kind of want to give you this background to give you a bit of a more contextual example. I think, usually what we're doing is we're bringing together a bunch of SMEs. So someone from the Salesforce team goes, hey, we've got this idea around the certification that we want. We want to kind of focus on this. We want to encourage people into this area. So they usually collect a bunch of SMEs through networks that they'll have. So for example, because I helped out a lot with the Marketing Cloud exams, it was like, oh, Doug, you may be a good candidate for this. That's something that really, it's, especially when you're with partners, it's those relationships with Salesforce that someone might know you, might reach out to you, but often there's also information available on LinkedIn. There's often posts for those kind of things. The first step for that is really trying to then set the scope. So someone will give a kind of broad idea, but then the question is, well, how does that broad idea kind of put into more of a concrete example? And that is an example here we'll go through a bit later, but one point of that might be, is this an exam for someone who is comfortable with development, or is this an exam for people who maybe aren't comfortable for development? So those kind of questions are really important to try and set the scope of those questions and the type of person that's really ideal. The next thing is then looking at what kind of topics are covered. In the B2C case here, we're talking about service, commerce, and marketing. Okay, but are we talking about financial services cloud? I mean, that's also for consumers. Is that relevant to us, and should we be talking about those things? What kind of topics are relevant? We're going to look into some of those things, but trying to figure out if this is more discussing how to run a project, or is this around how to run a team? Is this around how to manage clients? Is this a project around technical debt? What are those things that you should be able to talk about, and what should you know about? Next step is insight. Okay, these are the topics. What would we normally expect people to have before they could pass this exam? So if we expect people to be able to talk around marketing cloud integration patterns, quite often you'd need to have maybe a marketing cloud consultant certification, because those people are often experienced with pulling data in and out of marketing cloud. So those are the kind of things that we then try and define those prerequisites. You're going to then go through a process of writing questions. Most of the time that's taken a month or so. Everyone kind of splits up. All the SMEs kind of go and write a bunch of questions and then come back to do technical review. So that's kind of everyone saying, okay, Doug, you wrote a great question, but I completely disagree, and I don't think that's the right way to do it. And please go and change it because you know nothing. And there's a lot of yelling and screaming at each other because everyone believes they're right, and they're all SMEs, so they're all fantastic people, and they all know a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, you have to kind of find a conclusion where everyone's kind of happy with it. And sometimes that's why you end up with questions which maybe aren't perfect in one person's view, but in the other person's view, they're much more appropriate for what you're trying to achieve. And that's why it's really important to have this kind of peer review, where there's usually at least 5 people really discussing those questions in depth based on their experience. Obviously, in the B2C example here, we've really tried to make sure that on any call that we're discussing those things, it's not just a marketing cloud person, but there's also someone who really specializes deep into commerce cloud, so that we're not talking shit about one thing or saying, okay, this is not relevant, we don't need it. Maybe someone else has a completely different view. So it's really important, those technical reviews. And I find them fascinating. I also learn a lot about my job when I'm going into them. So it's really a great part of the exam writing process. The next one, and this is usually one of the more contentious issues, is going through score estimation. So if you think about it, all of these questions, each person is going to go, well, this question's easy, this one's hard. The thing is that depending obviously on your viewpoint, you're going to go, well, this one's easy or this one's hard. So what we kind of do is get most of the people that are involved in writing the questions and go, given these set of questions, how many people do you think would pass this? What percentage pass rate would be for the specific question? It's called an Angoff rating for those that are interested. I maybe even spelled that wrong, but that's what I remember it to be. And the idea is to kind of say, most people usually group around a similar area. So for hard questions, you might say, okay, most people will be maybe 60, 70% of people will get this right. Interestingly, most of you will see Salesforce certifications are usually kind of 60, 70% pass rates, and there's a reason for that. What you will see sometimes is someone says, look, no one knows this, 95% of people will fail this, or 95% of people will pass this. And this kind of score estimations process is really useful to try and pick out which questions maybe are too easy or too hard. So it's a really useful thing. And then normally that goes into a better exam. So that usually means that there's going to be an exam which goes out where actually there's a whole bunch of questions that are sent out and there's a whole bunch of tests done. So basically real world tests to see the actual results. That's not been done in this case because there's quite a small pool of people who are eligible for it, and also because usually it's done in testing centers, which in most cases are closed at the moment. So not really so easy. I'm certainly, maybe just quickly, if there's any questions around this, I'm happy to just attach those now before I get really into the meat of the session. Nope. Cool bananas.
No, I'll give you one.
Sure.
one. So it's John Adrian at Capgemini.
Sure.
We're actually thinking in the background here, who does this line up to in terms of the kind of key individual? And to me, it seems like the individuals who really have to think about operations, how sales operations, how marketing operations come together. Would that be a fair kind of summary of who this is really ideal for?
Sure. So let's come back to that one, because
Okay.
I think there's a few points on that one where I'll go through audiences and stuff like that. So I think that's exactly where you're trying to hit at. Who is this exam for?
Yep. Okay. I'll leave you to it.
Nice segue into target audience. And so, I mean, look, I copy pasted this shamelessly from Trailhead because I don't like making slides and putting text if I've already got some great material. And I think it really sums up nicely the discussions that we had around trying to prepare this exam. And I think it accurately reflects a lot of the questions that are inside the exam. So it really sums up into kind of three things that you would want to know. So if you're someone who fits into having these discussions and is talking with clients around these topics, this is probably the kind of exam that you'll be comfortable with. We'll go to some more specific roles in a second, but just to go on to what kind of content is here that might figure out if this is relevant for you. So first one is business leadership. This is a question around, do you really understand what's happening for the customer? Do you understand what the objectives are? Do you understand what the business is trying to achieve given a certain context? So that's really around trying to understand what is going on in the business, what's going on in the world, what makes sense for certain customers, what's a good idea, what's a bad idea. Completely abstract of the exact tooling, right? So we're not talking about marketing, commerce, or service. We're talking about Fred on the website wants to click a button. What button? How can Fred click the button the easiest? At that point, you're then going to delivery leadership. So there's certainly some things there that we've covered, which are more focused on how do you actually work in a project. So orders of kind of execution of certain things. What things should you do first? How should you prioritize certain activities? It's not the hugest part, but it is really an important part that we discussed of a B2C solution architect, which is not just something that usually you're talking about, maybe the solution, you're talking about technical things, but rather we're usually dragged into some kind of discussion around how to run a project. And so that's really important to also talk about how, practically speaking, you can actually run those delivery, thinking about what teams are involved, the resources you've got, and those kind of aspects. And lastly, and I definitely think that this is probably the meat of most of this exam, it is really technical leadership, right? So it's not talking about development, it's not developer focused, and I really want to make that clear. There is no questions here where you're going to get asked about AMP script, right? There is a lot of questions around how do those things work together, and that requires quite a depth of technical understanding about the platform. So how those platforms work together, and really understanding the content of those of the clouds. We'll go into which clouds are covered in a second. But I think what that means is that you're really going to talk about these kind of roles where you've got your technical architects, you've got your solution architects, lead consultants, and lead developers. So really the first two are kind of dead giveaways. I think the last two are also topics which I also see in some people, right? So someone maybe that is really used to marketing and really is good at what they're doing in the marketing area, guiding clients on things. Maybe as a lead developer, you've guided a team, you know technically how to plug things together. Those people might not be the perfect candidate, but they're definitely someone who we're seeing may be eligible to try and go through for this, right? So the idea is to have much broader than just wearing a consultant hat or just wearing a developer hat. It really is an architectural thing. But I definitely would see some people that I know which kind of call themselves a lead developer or a lead consultant would be a candidate for this kind of exam. I think your experience would be at least an SME in one of the domains. So the general domains are service, commerce, and marketing. You would want to be an SME in at least one of those domains, because that's what's going to set you up to be able to get a good chunk of the questions correct. If you're not an SME in any of the domains, you're going to struggle a little bit. If you're jack of all trades, it's probably not the best. You really want to have an expertise in one area that you can just see the question and go tick box done, tick box done, tick box done. And if you can do that, that's really going to improve your score in this. So I think that's definitely something that you want to try and consider. I would say that you should have at least been involved in the design of at least a multi-cloud solution, whether that's all three together or one cloud with two clouds together in some circumstances and two clouds in another circumstance. The reason for that is that a lot of these things are not necessarily technically, the day-to-day running of the platform, but rather how should you be plugging these things together? And so that means that you're going to need at least a solid foundation of those other two clouds, because if you're talking let's say your Salesforce core, and you really know Salesforce core fantastically, you've done all the things you need to around certification there, but you struggle to understand what a subscriber key is in Marketing Cloud and why there's two different names for subscriber key and contact key. If for you that's a challenge, it's going to be a problem in the exam, because we're really talking about customers here, and that's all based around identity. And contact key is kind of important for your identity. So those are really the areas where you need to know what data is stored in which system at a high level, at least. But it's really knowing at least one cloud that's going to help you get across that line. Honestly speaking, this is a focus on multi-cloud partners. So if you're sitting in an agency, maybe marketing agency, where you really just focus on Marketing Cloud, maybe this is something you can go for, but it's probably not the main focus of this exam. We are talking here about something that really is broader with a lot of multi-cloud solutions. And because of that, it often is also not something that you're going to see if you're working not for a partner, but you're working just for private companies. You're probably not going to be the main candidate for this, because you're not going to see a whole bunch of different implementations and kind of the errors and the mistakes, and you're not going to have the chance to make all those discussions. So I do think that's there, and maybe there's some other feedback that other people definitely have around whether it's a good or a bad thing. I just think it's a bit practical in the same way that we don't see that many CTAs work for actual companies. We usually see them work in consulting partners. When we're going to content, there's, let's say, the three main clouds that we're talking about here. So the B2C commerce, Demandware, Marketing Cloud, and Service Cloud, but there are other areas. So I just wanted to also mention on those, because they are quite important, especially Customer 360 Data Manager. It's obviously something that I think most people have never touched, never investigated, never played with, never really cared about. It is important, and it is part of the vision from Salesforce from an identity perspective. And really, like I mentioned, all of these clouds are really talking about customers, and it's knowing your customers. So this identity aspect is kind of thread throughout the whole exam. It's really important to understand. So I definitely recommend that you read up on that. On the other side, however, there is kind of the more traditional connectors and accelerators. So when we talk about connectors, we talk about the Marketing Cloud connector, or we talk about the order management connector, for example, for commerce to service, or accelerators, like we can have, for example, the connector for Marketing Cloud to commerce, which are not officially connectors. They are accelerators, which need development and customization. But you need to have a fair idea about what all those things are, what they can and what they can't do. That's really important to be able to kind of get a lot of the questions in this exam. So it is stuff that you're going to have to dig into. You can't just look at the clouds, but rather it's a lot of focus on how those things work together. And then lastly, you've also got kind of related clouds and products. So there are questions which relate to, for example, financial, health, not-profit, Datarama. I think there might be a question in there from memory, or Audience 360, right? There's those kind of questions of clouds, but they're not the focus, right? So there may be one or two questions in there which are relevant for you, but they're not going to be the main focus of what it is. And that's going to come through when you look through all the Trailhead stuff. You're going to see really that the focus is on the stuff on the left-hand side. Just don't be surprised about the stuff on the right. So maybe on the content stuff, I don't know if there's any particular questions there that anyone's got that they want to jump up with before I go into prerequisites.
I mean, it's not necessarily a question, but I noticed that, you know, in previous conversations, like, oh, do you know core Salesforce, but what's specifically called out there is Service Cloud. So if you've got a lot of experience with high velocity sales, then, you know, it's not.
Yes, so this is very much, the discussion is based around Service Cloud. That is not to say there's nothing with Sales Cloud. That is not to say there's nothing with something else, but most use cases that we're talking about are related to Service Cloud. And again, that's going to come through from the Trailhead documentation that you're going to be reading through, or Partner Learning Camp if you've got access to Partner Learning Camp. So there's a lot of stuff there that is focused on service, and it's not it's not focused on the B2B side where high velocity sales is more focused, for example. So those things are usually avoided because they will fall into a B2C Solution Architecture certification, which sooner or later will exist. And maybe I'm going to get shot for saying that. But anyway.
I mean, no, they definitely, it was on a slide at.
I've seen it. I've seen it somewhere. It's not so secret, but
yeah,
let's find out if I get a message a bit later about why did you say that. So let's find out.
Hashtag safe harbor FY22. Let's move on.
Cool. So going into prerequisites, the official prerequisites here on the left-hand side are the version that officially you should be following, right? So those are Marketing Cloud Email Specialist, Platform App Builder, Integration Architecture Designer as your basis. Part of those discussions there are, well, where is commerce? And I think a lot of that is because the main comment that I mentioned at the beginning was, you know, this is not a certification which is focused just for developers. And you will notice that there's not really an option not for developers from the certification path. I take that as the main reason. But I would say in the Doug's unofficial guidance, don't take this too seriously, but I think it's probably helpful if you did these things, maybe experience having a Commerce Cloud developer certification certainly will not do you any harm. And for those of you that really aren't developers, maybe looking at the one of the training paths, which is the B2C Commerce Merchant. It's not a certification, it's like a training seminar, and it's kind of like ADM 101, I think it's called, or 201. And that's kind of just more about getting you involved on B2C commerce because you maybe don't know anything about it. And if you're really good at your core and your marketing, that might be what you need to just kind of get a bit of playing around and trying to look into things. I do also recommend Marketing Cloud Consultant because there are questions around best practice and things like that usually aren't so covered in Email Specialist. So it's definitely not a prerequisite officially. But I think if you had that certification, the chances of you, or your likelihood of passing is probably higher. And I think that's something that people would like to know. So I'm kind of sharing that. And I also think, generally speaking, about at least one connected cloud experience. It's not a prerequisite. You don't have to have done it. There's no requirement there. But I really think that if you've done an implementation where maybe you were responsible for one part, but you had those discussions with the other parts, and you were really involved in how to design something together, that would probably be at least enough to give you a good head start. If you've really never had the discussion around where should we store customer engagement data, where should we be sending emails from, where should we store orders, how should we manage payments, those kind of things. If you've never had that discussion, it's going to be hard for you to get through a lot of these things. So that's not the target audience. It really is people who have done these kind of conversations multiple times, ideally. Any questions maybe around prerequisites? I don't know if Abraham would like to comment on his thoughts additionally on this one. But...
I have a question for Abraham, actually. So, you know, I was part of the early classes back in May of last year through Abraham and team. And back then, the third prerequisite was actually Marketing Cloud Developer, JavaScript, or the Commerce Cloud exam. Now you replace that with the Integration Architecture exam. I'm kind of curious why you changed that, because both exams are similar on 2/5 of the way, but it's really quite a big jump for people to take the Integration Architect exam.
So like this is it's a great question, and I think so for those of you that don't know me, my name's Abraham Lloyd. I'm the lead evangelist for the B2C Solution Architect cert. And so this is, when I saw this and Carrie reached out to me and I found Doug was presenting, this is like a super happy accident for me because this has been a labor of love of the past year, right? Especially given the type of year it was. But this is a cliche you hear a lot. It was very much a journey, right? And I feel like when we started with the cert, the persona was, in our mind, a little bit more technical and developer heavy. And what evolved was our thinking about really what is it that we want to democratize, right? And I think Doug did a really great job of kind of articulating the things that the cert covers and how the cert addresses 3 core kinds of leadership, and how, as a solution architect, you can practice your career as a business analyst, a product or program manager, or a technical developer, technical lead, or technical architect, right? And what we're trying to do here is create a cert that augments however you're choosing to practice your career within the domain of multi-cloud, B2C specific use cases. And so Jimson, we pulled out the development heavy prerequisites because we just didn't feel like they were necessary. We feel that like they really turned this into another developer cert, and we didn't want to cater to that.
Yeah, I just felt that the Marketing Cloud Developer exam, 2/5 of the exam was on REST and SOAP APIs, whereas the integration exam, you got 5 or 6 different, you got Salesforce Connect, Heroku Connect, platform events, Salesforce APIs, external services, and MuleSoft. So the breadth and width of the integration exam is massive compared to the Marketing Cloud. That was my big pet peeve.
So look, integration is the foundation of really being able to build these experiences, right? Because we need to be able to integrate our core products together, and you'll leverage a subset of those capabilities. But then you also need to be able to integrate a customer's ecosystems products with the Salesforce platform, where you would use another set of those capabilities. Now, you don't have to get every question right? And so there's certain capabilities that maybe you don't need to know as deeply, but we feel like the surface area, what gets covered by these prerequisites, really serve as a very, very strong foundation for you as a solution architect, however you choose to lean or practice your career, to be able to move forward and at least know what capabilities exist in the context in which they should be used, right? One of the things that we really focused on here is like our mission was really democratizing knowledge. And I think everyone that's been a SME in one of these products and then gotten introduced to another one of these products, everything, if you're used to working with hammers and nails, everything looks like a nail. And that's specifically the kind of thing that we're trying to dispel, and why we chose the prerequisites we did.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I mean, I would just add to that in the sense that, because I've been studying for the integration designer, exam, and I took it before Christmas and failed it by 1 mark. So it's coming, I'm coming, but it wasn't quite there yet. But I also feel with that one, as opposed to the maybe the Marketing Cloud developer one, was the developer one might ask about syntax, where the designer one was more about articulating the concepts. And I don't think like at the point that you're getting any sort of architect certification, there's also an expectation that you not only maybe understand the concepts, but you've moved more into a place where you're articulating those to a range of people, both technical and non-technical, rather than just knowing the actual technical.
You don't know the API endpoint and you can build up JSON, but rather, why are we doing an API endpoint?
Yeah.
What is the point of this?
Right. Or like, hey, when would I use a platform event? Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, for me, I think it's a let's say a happy medium. Certainly I do agree with you, Jim, on that it's a lot of content in there, but I do think, you know, I can agree definitely with getting rid, and we were discussing this earlier, you know, I can understand getting rid of the developers requirements, but really one of the things that came out from everyone, even the ones who were saying we don't want developer prerequisites there, we don't think it fits the profile. Those same people were saying, but integration is really important. And everyone said integration is really important. And that's the outcome, right? So I think that's where it is. I think, you know, maybe if I go a bit forward, there's also another comment I've got here as well, which I think maybe goes more into that. You know, preparation wise, I do think it's the experience stuff that's going to be useful for you. You don't need to be an absolute expert in everything. The pass rate from memory, I think, is 63%.
And sorry to interrupt you, Doug. I would like to add one point. This
Sure.
is Anil from Capgemini UK. So in the previous slide you mentioned unofficial, but I have appeared this exam, but the point which you mentioned, it should be official, because the B2C commerce knowledge is essential, but they haven't mentioned as official guide. You mentioned as a B2C commerce developer, but my point of view is B2C commerce knowledge is essential to clear this certification.
I definitely agree that B2C
Yeah, because
knowledge is essential.
yeah,
The developer certification is definitely not.
yeah, the B2C commerce knowledge is essential. Yeah,
Yeah,
agree.
and that's not surprising,
Thanks.
right? I mean, this is a certification for B2C,
Yeah.
which includes, in the Salesforce world, commerce, marketing, and service as the focus. So it's perfectly reasonable that is the case.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I think, you know, again, preparation-wise, you don't need to be an expert in everything. The pass rate is not, you know, 99%. You know, you need to know a good amount of what you're trying to do here. And everyone, believe me, like I mentioned, the tech reviews, some of the things that I wrote down, people are like, no, because this won't work. You didn't think about this. And I'm like, oh, damn it. So there's definitely the scope there that even the people who believe they to be the brightest sun in the world and have halos above their heads, you know, they're making mistakes. So I definitely think that that's clear for everyone else, that this is not supposed to be, you know, everything, but you should be able to pull the basics together and come out with logical conclusions. And I really think that that's something that experience brings to you, which is hard to put into content. I do think, you know, you've got Partner Learning Camp. Most of you will have access to this if you're working at partners. I know Carrie has a question on that one popping up in a second. But the idea there is that that's got all the content that you're going to need to be able to go into these kind of exams, right? So it should have everything that you need there. Of course, we all know when we read something, when we apply something, it's two very different levels of learning. And so I really recommend you to say, yeah, it's there, but are you going to remember, you know, thousands of pages of content and images and videos? Probably not. It's really the application of those that's going to help you. And that's why I say trial and error is a great way to do it. If you haven't had the project experience, I myself went in as part of this before we started doing some of these things, to go in and really play around with a lot of those connectors and things that I hadn't had to do before, because I really wanted to get a better understanding myself of those things. So that's really where I'd say those trial and error things. If you've got access to a Commerce Cloud on-demand sandbox, if you've got access to a Marketing Cloud business unit that you can play around with, go in, try and connect things, see what happens, play around. That will at least give you a good understanding about how stuff works and what does work and what doesn't work. So I do think that's you know, a fallback option when you don't necessarily have that level of experience. And the last one sounds a bit strange sometimes, but I think Kerry's also going to kind of go into this one, the study group. But this kind of peer review, sitting down with people and being able to kind of draft out ideas around how something could work, if it makes sense, if this is a good approach, how would you do something, how would I do something, and then have that critique, because it's exactly this comment that you've got 3 people in a room, all 3 of them could be right. It's just a question about which one makes most sense for a specific circumstance, and having people kind of drill into it really makes all the content that you're reading in places like Partner Learning Camp really sink in. I do want people to keep in mind a couple of other things, which are just plain pragmatics about exams. In this case here, the answers tread the line between realistic and best practice, right? So this is not supposed to be a best practice always applies, everything is perfect and nothing can go wrong and everything is great and Marketing Cloud perfectly integrates with everything in commerce and sales. That's not the case. It is realistic, right? So there are things there where you really need to be a bit more focused on best practice. So how should you do things? You need to keep that in mind, but it's how should you do things in the real world, right? And that means that sometimes maybe the sold vision of how things should work, we all are familiar with at Salesforce, maybe is not the realistic version, and so is not a best practice in the case of the exam. That's again where I go back to experience is something that's hard to teach. The exam is text heavy. There's a lot of text in it, especially if you're a not native speaker. Consider requesting the additional 30 minutes. You do it through Trailhead cases. This applies from memory to all Salesforce exams, but you can request that because there is a lot of reading involved. Maybe for some people, that's a good tip. I also would put in here, there's a lot of multi-select answers. In a lot of exams, you might have some that are multi-select and a lot single. This case is really driven that there's a lot of multi-select answers. And so what often will happen is that you maybe know 2 out of the 3 answers, but the third one you've got no idea because maybe you know Service Cloud really well, but Marketing Cloud is something you're really weak in. And these are designed in a way that you can't just answer the question right if you only know one domain. So that's why I say you need to have a solid base in quite a few different areas, and then really ideally an expertise in one area to make sure you can tick off the easy questions for that domain easily. I wanted to put some examples in here of kind of things high level. This is definitely nothing that's going to give you an answer to a question, but it gives you the kind of idea about what's being asked, right? So it's things like, given a specific scenario, what order would you implement certain features based on a certain business requirements, right? So would you start with commerce, marketing, or Salesforce, Sales Cloud? Why would you do that order? What makes sense for you? Maybe something like understand what use cases a data manager solves. What cases can it solve? What can't it solve? What's the purpose of the tool? Having that understanding is going to help you answer some questions because you'll know, is this a use case which applies, yes or no? Maybe given a specific scenario, justify why you're using headless commerce, right? So what is headless commerce? If you're asking yourself that as a question, it's a good time to start reading up on that, and there's plenty of material available in Partner Learning Camp. And maybe last times, which system should generate data and which system should be the master of the data? We always assume if the system creates the data, that should be the master, but it's not always the case. And understanding the difference could be really valuable and could be the difference between, getting a question right or passing the exam or not. From my side, I know I spoke a lot here, and I promised Kerry I would do 20 minutes, and I'm now a solid hour, 30 minutes and 35 minutes even. But definitely, I'm open to questions. So I don't know how you want to run the rest of this one there, Kerry.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. While we swap back the slides, I've got a couple of questions for the people in the group. So one of these is to find out whether people on the call actually have the prerequisite certs. So I'll make that available. Hopefully you can see that poll.
Yep.
While I'm just trying to find my slide deck. It's just gone behind all my windows. Cool, well, we're still doing polls on one screen. But actually, I'll just focus on that one for the moment. So let me just share those results with people. So it looks like, I'm impressed by the number of the people that have email specialists on this call. Welcome. Congratulations to all of you. And it does look as if we've got, you know, a few people with a number of the ones that might be required in here, which is interesting. But as you say, it does rely on experience, and this skill set is, I would suggest, is probably in quite high demand, right? Because it is so, like, not many people actually have all of these different.
I'm often requested for my clone, so I would like to put that in the yes category.
Yeah. There's a strong desire for people with this skill set. So it is, I don't even know what I've shared now. That's a treat. Hang on. So if I've got another poll, which just to get a feel for who actually has access to partner learning. So if we do, so there we go. So this is just to find out, I mean, I was going to ask who works for a partner, but I mean, the essence here is whether you actually have access to partner learning or not. So again, that's interesting. We've got, if I again share that. So it's almost a 50-50 split between who has access to partner learning and who doesn't. And then because this is, I mean, I'm interested in this cert, and it's something that I think I'm going to start working towards. So I'm also interested to find out on the call who would be interested in potentially participating in a study group. And again, this isn't collecting anybody's names. This is just to gauge sort of the level of interest.
I think you got a lot of interest there, Carrie.
Yeah.
That's
Someone said no. One person said no. Who is that person?
I mean, Doug's already got it, right? So, but Doug, you can participate in our group.
It was you, Jimson.
Okay. Well, I mean, which is, again, this is very interesting. Because again, I would imagine you haven't given up your Thursday evening if you weren't interested in this topic. But, you know, after we've gone through all of that conversation, that's a really interesting.
I was worried I was going to turn everyone off. I had the same thing internally, and I was told don't be too negative, don't be too critical. They try and encourage people to do it, and I see I haven't done that job very well. So I'm sorry. I should have been more critical.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's a classic case of you need to be cloned, and you can start promoting this to everyone on Salesforce's behalf. So again, that's really interesting. So what I'll do after this call, so the people that have actually signed up for this session, if I get more information about what a study group might look like, I'll share some information with maybe a form that people could fill out, and hopefully then would have some more information about what was involved and what the time commitment would be, so that everybody can have an opportunity to potentially get involved in that. But it does look that there's like quite a lot of interest in this exam, so that is good to see.
Good stuff.
I am just waiting for my slide deck to load.
Carrie, do you have a link to maybe share with attendees that would love to have access to our courses, but maybe don't have access to Partner Learning Camp?
Well, it's amazing that you asked that. Once I manage to get my slide deck to load, then I will come on to, so I've got a couple of slides which talk about what's available on the Trailhead, and then also has a link around the content which is available for those of you that don't have access to the Partner Learning Camp. I'm just sort of suffering from the whole, my machine is not loading particularly quickly.
There we go.
Lovely. Right, so as you can see, there are a couple of Trailhead modules on here, and it talks about the prep for the exam, and obviously links a bit more and is some follow-up information in terms of the actual breakdown and the pass percentage. Then you've got an exam guide, as you would expect with any of our Salesforce exams. And then, brilliant. So if we'll drop that into the chat. But if you go, also, if you went onto Trailhead and searched for the B2C certification, that exam guide would come up. And then on the next page, I've got So on the next slide, we've got a lovely link here, which Abraham has shared with us. So if you don't have access to the Partner Learning Camp, there is a lot of the content that you would find on there in this article, which I think is under help and training. Yeah, under the help and training section. So if you could pop that into yeah.
This is in the chat already. This is in the chat.
Cool. So everybody wants to like, and Jimson, if you just click on that link, are you able to, is that gonna, hopefully that's not gonna do something horrible to your machine. You'll see in here that this is, this is quite nice, like, and it says, it scrolls down and you've got all the foundational pieces here of the course. And if you expand out those links, it's actually got the sessions there which are available, which is really great.
One of the things about these courses is this is the exact same learning content that partners get. Okay, so you get the exact same experience, you get the exact same presentation content. The learning journey is exactly the same. So I'm ecstatic and grateful that Trailhead did this to expose it to customers. And I love the fact that we're enabling customers and partners the exact same way.
Yeah. I think this is really great, particularly for, people who might not work necessarily with one of the larger partners. I mean, I'm currently in that situation right now. But equally, like, this is about improving the solutions that we deliver. So if you do have knowledge in maybe 2 of the domains, right, it's still good for you to strive towards making sure that you round out, the knowledge in the one that you're less, experienced in, so that when you're in a situation, you're still providing good advice. Cool. So I think that probably rounds up a lot of our programming. Do people have questions?
Carrie, before we take any questions, I just want to share one more link. If you go to my profile in Trailhead and you just follow that and search, we produced some really, really in-depth trail mixes to complement the program. All right, so architecting a 360 view of the customer, nuts and bolts, how to do marketing recommendations, integration with order management, platform integrations, how to practice commerce, service, marketing excellence. If we had put these together as the study for Trailmix, it probably would have been about 200,000 points. Okay, but these are all defined or grouped by use case. Yeah. And so as a complement to, we reference these within our courses, but as a complement, and if you happen to like Trailhead and you want to kind of dive deeper, these are available to you as well.
Okay, wow.
That's a lot of points.
It's a lot of hours.
Major by the time you're done with it.
There's one, Jimson, there's one, I forget what it is, but I think it's API, multi-cloud API driven experiences, where I think it on itself is 48,000 points. That just giving you like, there we go, order of execution. There, well, and so you think about what that topic is, right? Like you'd almost kind of expect that.
Yeah.
So
21 of them.
Yeah.
22. Now it's 22, it's 21. Trick question.
Anyone in the UK locked down and looking for something to do? Cool.
Yeah, okay. That was a lot.
Yeah, no, but it's also really great that content is there. And this is obviously, not that any of them aren't, but it's a serious certification with a breadth of knowledge. So it's good to reflect that.
Put a link on the chat.
Thank you, Jimson.
You'll be even more famous, Abraham.
Yeah.
Not only compared to some, Doug. Only compared to some.
Any questions? If people want to unmute themselves and ask anything. Or do we feel that we've I mean, I feel it's quite comprehensive in our coverage, but anything, anyone, any more for any more?
I think
there are no questions. I would love to just close with one last thought. Look, I'm biased, right? I work at Salesforce, so safe harbor this. But I really do feel like this cert has got tremendous breadth in terms of who it's available for and who can benefit from this, right? And when we think about, if we think about the ecosystem and historically how we've thought about architects, you know, we tend to measure competency in terms of technical knowledge or technical proficiency, right? But that's, to me, that's a legacy paradigm, right? What I love about this certification is that if you're interested in becoming an architect or growing your career as an architect, this certification puts you on the path, right? Because it doesn't have a strong dependency on technical or development knowledge. It certainly complements you. It certainly accelerates your learning if you have it, but it's not a hard and fast requirement. And I feel like being an architect almost in some ways becomes an accident, right? In a lot of ways, it's like being a bartender, where no one grows up to say they want to be a bartender. It's just something you kind of evolve into. I feel like with architects, it's very, very similar in technology, where it just feels like, well, this feels like the next thing, but there is this technical path that you have to, you know, that we're conditioned to think that we have to go down, right? One of the things I believe, especially this year, is that we've all had to be architects. We've had to architect the safety of our families. We've had to architect new living situations or scenarios. We've had to architect how to keep our jobs or maintain our jobs and provide. And look, I'm very passionate about this, but I just want to say that this is available for everyone. You know, if you want to be an architect, this can put you on the path. If you're a developer, it'll make you a better developer. And if you're already an architect in a core domain, it'll give you superpowers because it's going to accelerate your ability to practice what you know in other domains or other products. So I feel like that 89% study group number was a little low. and I, you know, I think there's a lot here. I'm very excited about this. So I hope this was helpful. I really appreciate the opportunity to join your call. And Doug, I really appreciate the awesome job you did giving an overview of this. So thank you.
No problems.
No, thank you, everyone. Had a couple of questions in the chat.
Oh, so that's a great question. How many customers are using service marketing and commerce, and how many do you think will have it over the next 2 years? Well, so I feel like I need to forward you to marketing relations or some relations group within Salesforce to be able to have them accurately speak to this. But what I will say is this. There is this emphasis on seamless experiences, right? Or frictionless experiences. And these experiences are expensive to develop, right? They require investment to be able to implement correctly so that they're maintainable. And I feel like this is what's creating the demand and the situation where people are going to Doug saying, Doug, where's your clone, right? Because customers want these experiences. You know, what we've heard is that the pandemic has accelerated customer experience and consumer demands by 6 years. Well, that's because they want frictionless, seamless, trustworthy, personalized. And there isn't one product on the planet that does this all, right? And we feel very strongly, and again, I am super biased. Let me safe harbor one more time. The Salesforce platform is, you know, it's the platform on the planet to do that. So I think the demand is only going to grow. And I think that's one of the reasons that Salesforce chose to invest in this cert last year when they did.
Cool. We had one other question, which was around SQL, and I think that's no SQL is required for either this or for email specialist. Right? You don't need any of that.
Look, the knowledge is helpful, right? Because you think like the knowledge of, you know, how do relational databases work? What's their structure? How do you relate data within one system to other pieces of data? All that stuff is super helpful. There's a lot of data strategy in the enablement material as well as in the exam. But no, you will not get asked a SQL question.
Cool. Any other questions? Wonderful. Well, again, we have gone over, and I appreciate that so many of you have actually stayed. So I think that's testament to how interesting people have found the particular session. Again, looking to potentially get a group of people together that are interested in going through this journey. And I'll share some links on that afterwards when I have a bit more detail about what that might look like. So thank you very much, Doug, for joining us. Thank you, Abraham, for answering all of our questions and being willing to engage with us.